Welcome back everyone to more NASCAR Heat 4 at Knee Pit Gaming. Today's setup video takes us back to the dirt late models at Charlotte. So I absolutely love the dirt tracks in this game and have quite a bit of fun running them. I've tried out something a little bit different with the setup today, so let's get started. Before we jump into the setup discussion, let's first talk a little bit about the track. Now, we don't have to worry about tire wear with the dirt late models. And Charlotte Dirt Track is a place you can run wide open pretty easily. I generally choose not to because I want a little bit more control over the car, a little bit more stability out of the car, simply because I spend so much time in traffic and I want a setup that I can be on and off the gas as much as I need to be without really upsetting the car. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. I've gone a little bit different direction. Instead of just going for raw speed, which there should be plenty of in the setup, the goal time you see here of 14.83 is definitely doable with this setup or better. So speed isn't an issue, but it wasn't the primary concern for this setup. Starting off with the shocks, you can see that I'm using the 3.5 setup that has become pretty normal for me, and that's simply because it works for me at basically everywhere. Now, that's not to say that other setups when the shocks will not work. They work absolutely great. I tested out several, and they all worked really fine. And it's a great way to dial in individual parts of the setup, individual corners of the car that you want to work more or less. But for what I'm going to post on the channel, the 3.5 setup works great. If you're looking for quicker transitions out of the car, then use higher numbers for the shock settings, and that will certainly achieve that goal. Moving on to the weight settings, this is where I really started to dial in the comfort and the stability that I was looking for out of this particular setup. As I mentioned before, I spend so much time in traffic, on and off the gas. I wanted a car that I was going to be able to have the rotation I needed, but also the stability I needed in order to run whatever groove I might need to while in traffic. And the front weight and wedge settings of 54% each give me exactly that. Now, if you're having trouble getting the car to rotate on entry, then you're going to want to come down on both of these numbers. Decrease the front weight, decrease the wedge, and that will certainly help the car to rotate quite a bit. So it all depends on how you drive the car. But for me, the 54% on front weight and wedge works wonderfully, as well as quite a bit of adjustability there as well. Spring settings, 280 and 220 on the front. The more you increase the left front spring, that will help you out generally on corner entry a little bit, not nearly as much in the dirt cars, but I like to put as much left front spring as I can in the dirt car just to help on entry. Right front spring at 220, it's certainly not the highest value I could have used here, but a little bit higher than what I had tested, simply because I wanted that additional stability. And the more right front spring you have in the car, the tighter the car is going to be, the more stable the car is going to be. So this is another very easy way to adjust the rotation of the car. The lower you make that right front spring, the quicker that car is going to want to turn, and the more overall it's going to want to turn. Moving on to the rear springs, 152 and 280. This is pretty much the opposites. Minimum left front or very low left front works very well, and maximum right rear also works very well. So a lot of split in the rear of the car, and that is because whenever I got on the gas, I want the car to rotate. Again, it's all about traffic and maneuvering through traffic, so I wanted to be able to use the throttle to rotate the car, and using this much split in the rear springs certainly enables me to do that. Moving on to the tire settings, there is a ton of adjustability here. You can use max tire pressures here, and it works just fine. In fact, you might find a little speed out of it, but I much prefer the feel of using minimum left side pressures and then just a little bit higher than that on the right side. But tons of adjustability here, and it's really all about the feel that you want from the car. So definitely try out some higher numbers and see if that is more to your liking. Miscellaneous settings, +5 and -5 on the camber, pretty standard for me at the dirt tracks, and it works wonderfully well. That's not to say, once again, that it's the only way of doing it. You can certainly use much less camber than this and be perfectly fine. Front sway bars at 1.15, fairly traditional for me at the dirt, and it continued to work here in NASCAR Heat 4. Moving on to the track bar, 11 inches on the left side, 10 inches on the right side. We have a reverse split here, meaning the left side is higher than the right side, simply because the higher the left side number, the more it's going to help you on corner entry. The right side track bar is more for corner exit, and I didn't need any help on corner exit, so I can run a lower number here because of the split I'm using in the rear springs. Brake bias, not really something I use a lot, but if you want to trail brake the car a little bit going into the corner, use a lower value here, and that'll really help the car to rotate if you give just a little bit of brake on corner entry. Grill tape, no real reason for it. Wheel lock and steering offset at pretty traditional numbers for me. 10 degrees on the wheel lock and 0.05 on the steering offset. Moving on finally to the gear settings. This is another area where there's a lot of adjustability. You can go up a couple of clicks here on the rear end ratio, which will bring you into numbers like 529, or you can go down a little bit here as well. It all depends on what you want from the car. If you want the car to have a little bit more grip and be a little bit tighter under throttle, then run a lower number for the rear end ratio as opposed to a higher number, which will give you more RPMs. If I remember correctly, in testing, 529 was actually putting me on the rev limiter quite a bit. So I wanted to come down at least a couple of steps from that down to the 5.0 that I finally decided on. But again, tons of adjustability there. The lap times you're going to get at this track are going to be completely dependent upon how you drive the car. But again, if the car is stable but is a little bit too tight, then we've talked about some ways to help the car to rotate even more. Thank you very much for joining me, and stay tuned as we will continue our support for NASCAR Heat 4.